Hello, I'm Tom. Today I'm just going to be giving you a quick look at the circles script. It's available on my website at othercube.com. It's available as a script, and you can also download project files if the script doesn't work for you for some reason, because I'm not a master coder. So you can see here I've made this little animation, and there's very few keyframes compared to what you need to do normally to create an effect like this. So there's a lot we can do. So let's have a look at what we can do. To start off, I'm just going to delete the composition you just saw. There's some images in here that I'll get to in a bit. But the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure we've got a project open and we've got a composition that we can ape for the size of the circles layer. So if you've got a weird shaped composition, if you're doing a square thing or 720 or 1080 or whatever, you can always have the circles layer be the right size. So we're just going to go down to scripts and create a circles comp, and it's automatically created this composition for us. But the first thing you can see is that there's nothing here, and this is, I think, one of the limitations that I've run into. If anyone knows how to fix this, let me know. But the first thing we need to do is open up appearance under this controller effect, and then open up the color setting here, and you can see this fill color layer has set itself to controller, but we actually want it to be the fill color. So we click that and the circles have appeared, and then do the same for that stroke color. And the reason I've done it like this is so that you can change the layers that give the colors, and I will get into that a bit more in a bit. But for now, let's go through how it works. So basically, if we want to animate something here, all the animation is done on this controller layer, and then we can tweak stuff in here and keyframe all these parts. But the only thing that you need to animate in here is this controller layer. So just with the settings it's given me to start off with, I'm just going to hit S to bring up the scale. I'm just going to record a scale keyframe at 1 second, and then at 0 I'm going to set it to 0%. One of the things I'm going to be using in this a lot is this Ease and Whiz plugin, which is definitely worth checking out. It makes everything very smooth, and it's a good way to sort of add curves to your animations without having to put in too much effort. So I will just apply this curves to it. It's applied an expression to those keyframes. And now, if we scroll through, you can see that already, just with these basic settings, we've got ourselves quite a smooth and nice little animation, like this. So I'll just drag this out a bit, so we've got a bit more time to play with here. So let's go through some of the settings. To begin with, we've got the time offset at the top here. This is how much your layers are going to be offset by. So here you can see, if we set this to 0, the layers are just going to come in as they would if you just scaled them all together. But if we want to add some offset to it to make it all look a bit sort of crazier, we can adjust this here, and this is fairly sensitive. So essentially what's going to happen is if I put in minus 0.1, I'll explain that in a second, this back layer here is going to animate along with these keyframes, and then the rest of the layers, hold on, I might just turn off the just so we can see this a bit better. This back layer here is going to animate alongside the keyframes, and all the others are going to be staggered. You can see them moving there. by 0.1 seconds. And the reason I've put this to minus 0.1 is this way the back layer is the one that's following the keyframes. If I wanted the front layer to follow the keyframes, I could put this to plus 0.1 and it will give us quite a different effect. If you're doing this, you may need to move the composition along a bit, or just change where the keyframes are, the layer along a bit, sorry, just to make sure it all comes out as you want it to. You can see this time the front layer is coming out first, and then the back layers are the ones that are being offset against it. So that's quite cool. I'll put this back to minus 0.1 here, and I'll just re-enable this expression for the ease and whiz. The next thing that we have to play with is the circle size, and you can see here I've changed the scale of the layer which is controlling this. But if we've animated this and then we decide that we want this a bit smaller, instead of going through and changing this scale, we can just go up here to the circle size and change this, and it will change the size of the circles. It's very useful, and you can animate this on top of the scale if you want for some even weirder effects. The next one we have is the size offset. This will offset the circles against each other, so if we set this to 0 and just play this through, just turn up this circle size a bit so you can see it, you can see that the layers are animating out and then they're all being hidden by the front layer. And sometimes you want that if you want an effect like this, so you can sort of do something like that and play with that. But if you want to offset the layers behind, you can do that, and it will create more of a sort of target effect, which can be quite useful. The next thing we have is circle. This is called circles. It was originally sort of made to be circles, but along the way I decided that maybe we could do something that wasn't circles. So we've got a circle here and it's all animated. If we wanted this to be a different shape, we could just untick this circle here and suddenly it's a triangle. I'll just turn this off for a second. So you can see we've got a triangle now, and this can be animated along to make it any sort of polygon you want it to be. And you can also change the roundness of it, which can sort of make it look a bit more blobby. And all these are animatable, so you can play with it and get some really cool effects. And the other cool thing that I really like about this, if we set this back to 0, is if I just come here, say, and animate the number of sides, that should be 3, to say 5, it won't skip along and just become this 5 like this. It'll actually grow into the other shapes, which can create some very sort of smooth effects. And obviously we can animate all the roundness and stuff, so if we wanted this to, say, be a circle again, we can animate that, and then it'll sort of become blobby as it's growing the extra polygons out of it, or the extra sides out of it. So I'll just set that back. I think I'll leave this as a polygon for now. And the next bit here we have is rotation offset. So if we come in here, we've got the time offset set to minus 0.1. So if I just hit Control and R, which will bring up the rotation on top of the scale here, I can just say I want this to be 0 here, but here I want it to be minus 90, say. This will now animate out on top of the other one, which is creating a bit of a crazy effect. Hold on, I think maybe I'll just turn this off just to show you. You can obviously stack these things up. So this one now is offsetting the rotation against itself, but when it stops, just hit the when it stops, it'll be back to being aligned again, which is really useful. But sometimes maybe you want it to not be aligned, so you can use this rotation offset, and it'll offset the polygons against each other, or the circles, whatever you're using, and you can create these really cool effects which will also follow the main rotation offset. So that's that part. Next up we have the appearance. We've got tick boxes here for fill and stroke, so if we want to have a fill on it, we can have a fill. If we don't want a fill, we can take that off, and we can replace it with a stroke, or we can add a stroke on top of it, or do whatever we want with this. We can change the thickness of the stroke here, and sort of we can animate this as well. And there's also fade on scale, which can be very useful. At the beginning here we've got this, so it's scaling up from 0. So if I keep this off and go down here, it's all sort of coming out, and it's full opacity when it comes out. But maybe we want this to fade as it gets smaller. So this will take the scale and apply it to the opacity. So now as these are fading out, sorry, as they're scaling down, they're fading out, which can also be very useful. The colours here are quite interesting, I think. I'm just going to turn the fill back on and the stroke off. The way that you colour with this is you've got these two layers here, and it's probably worth mentioning now actually that if you want to add other layers into this, you always need only 3 layers at the top here, and that's all you can have in this little pre-composition. You can add other stuff into other layers, but otherwise it will start messing with the timing, and the colours won't come out right and all that lovely stuff. So I mean, if you want to, go ahead and do it, but it might create some funny effects. But the way the fill colour here works is that we have this layer which is the fill colour, and it's reading the colours from this layer from right to left, which is a bit odd, but it reads it right to left, and then applies that smoothly along these shapes. So what we can do is, if we have this fill colour, and this layer we can put anything on that we want. If we say we want this colour here, which has sort of gone off the screen, if we want this to be further across, we can move these points about, and because it's reading from right to left, it will read this is the top layer always, and this is the bottom layer always, and then go between them. So if I turn this off again, now we've changed how this looks completely. And this is all very easy to change. There's a 4 colour gradient on here when you start. If I wanted to sort of make the back of it pink or something, I can just do that and it'll update it all. But what's really powerful about this is that we've got this effect here, but what if we want to add something else to it? What if we want to have the colours moving or something? So if we, let's say we grab a circle here, and let's just feather this out a bit, and set the blending mode to normal, and that way it'll go on top of the 4 colour gradient we've got up here. So we can increase the radius of this a bit, and this probably isn't going to be perfect, we can move the center off, so we want it coming from the top, say, and going to the bottom to create sort of a flash. We can just animate the center of this. Let's put it over here, and then let's move this circle over here. Just take it out of shot so it doesn't keep the bottom layer looking bright, because that's going to be taking the colour from the very edge here. So now we've got this circle moving across. If we turn this layer off again, we've got everything as we set it up, and now we should have these colours. You can see the gradients coming through and creating colours on this. So you can do all sorts with this. You can animate it however you want. And if it's getting a bit confusing, we've got all these things here, and you're trying to figure out whereabouts on the layer they're being placed. There's a button on the controller layer, distribute position, which will just distribute the layers for you along the colour layer, which will let you see what's going on. So if we move this across now, we can see where the gradient's coming across. And the other thing we can do with this is, we've got this fill layer here, we can change the sample offset. So at the moment it's taking the samples from right across the centre. If I turn this off again, they're still distributed. We can change this and it will move down. With what we've got set up at the moment, there's not a lot of change between the different areas. But say we want to move this down, and then we move it across, we'll only get a slight increase on the circles, because now it's taking the colours from down here in the gradient there. So just set that back to 0, and when you're done looking at this, it's probably best to untick that, and it will all go back to having the position keyframes that you had before. We can also do the same with the stroke colour layer. So if I just turn the stroke back on, at the moment it's taking the colour from its own layer, this stroke layer here, which is the same as it was when we set it up. But if we want this to be the same as the fill colour, we can just change that and it'll come in. Or we could make a completely different stroke colour for this if we wanted to. And that's what's really powerful about this. I've got some other things here. If I just go over to my project, comp 1 that we started with, just to use to ape the circles layer and make it the size we wanted. We're going to take this one, just for this example, and drag an image into it, and just drag this down to fit it in. And now what we've got here is this sort of extra composition that we can put in if we want to, and use that and take the colour from that. So now you'll see I've added in this extra layer, so we need to get rid of one of these layers, otherwise the colours and things might end up being a bit funny. So I'm just going to delete the stroke layer for now. So if we go in here and change the fill colour layer to comp 1, it'll take the colours from this photo, which is pretty cool. So you can see it's taking the colours from here, so it's got the darker, and then it's all going to the light and back over to the darker bit over here. And what we can do with this, if we want to, is we could animate this however we wanted. We could add some blur to it. Just add a bit of gaussian blur, which will just sort of average the colours out a bit. And there's other things you can do. You can add whatever effects you want to that. And if we wanted to, we could even put a video in here. So I've just got a little short video. And now this video's in this layer, and it's going to be taking the colours of these circles from this layer now. So you can see it's sort of it's a little bit wacky, it's a bit fast, because the camera's shaking in the video. So if we wanted to just make that a little less of a strobe effect, that might be what you want. We could just go in here, add a Gaussian blur to this as well, which will do the same thing. It'll average out the colours a bit. And then if we go back here, this should be a lot smoother. In fact, it's probably a bit too smooth now, but you can play with all the settings and do whatever you want with it. So now you can see we've just got some slight sort of colour changes going on over the animation, which is just adding to it. So if you wanted to overlay this over a video or a photo or whatever, it would be really easy to get the colours that you want from the photo and set it up how you want. So I'm just going to set this back to following the fill colour, just to make things a little easier to see. And next we should move on to the effects. Okay, so I had an idea, so I've gone back and changed some stuff in the script to make it even more customisable, which is cool. So let's have a look at these effects. We've got edge cut, and what edge cut will do, let's just make this a circle again for a second, is you can change the cut amount here, change this back to 0, you can change the cut amount and it will cut through the shape, which is pretty cool. And you can change the angle of the cut to be wherever you want, and you can change the offset of the rotation, which can create these really nice effects. And one of the other good things about changing the rotation offset separately is, say if we had this as a polygon again, and we turn on the stroke. If we wanted to make a stroke and have it sort of come out, if we use the rotation offset up here, it would offset the whole shape, which is good sometimes if you want it to do that. But if you want to change these lines to rotate around, so you're rotating the cut here around the shape without the shape moving, and this allows you to make these sort of cool science fiction-y looking effects. Another thing we can do with this is just to show you, I'll just animate this. So we'll just set this from 3 to 5 seconds maybe, have it cut about 65%. And what I've got set down here is another time offset, so this works separately from the top one, and if we don't have it offset, all these lines are going to come out at the same time. But we can change this time offset to say 0.1, and then when we go through and watch it, you can see that these lines are being offset against each other, which can create some really nice looking effects. And the other thing that I've just added is this follow main rotation button, so checkbox. So if we turn the cut amount up a bit just to see, as it is at the moment, it's following the rotation of the shape, the cut. So the cut is moving based on the rotation of the shape. If we turn off follow main rotation and go through it again, the cut's going to stay in the same place while the shape moves, which can create some really nice little effects. So we could have this cutting like this, and we can change the rotation offset. So now we've just created a whole new looking thing very quickly. So let's have a look at the next effect. Next one we've got is slice, and follow main rotation set to 1 again. And what this is going to do make this a circle again. The cut cuts from one point to another, and the slice will, oops, sorry, been messing around with it. Just reset this. The slice is going to slice through the object like a pie chart, so you can slice it and then offset these rotations again if you want to, and create just even more sort of effects. And again, there's a time offset down here, so if I was to say close this up maybe, I'll just hit U again to find that keyframe and add ease and width to it. So now it's closing up, but we can set this to maybe minus 0.2 and it'll offset them each one by 0.2 seconds. Go through and watch this again. It's going to create quite a nice little effect. The other cool thing with this one, I'll just take off the animation for this. The other nice thing with this one is that we can change the position of where it's slicing from. So we can slice from, if we say we slice from down here, and let's just turn this up a bit, we can create these sort of starburst effects if we want to, and obviously we can change the offsets. Let's change that. Change the offset to 0 and just make the circle a bit bigger, and we've created sort of a sunburst effect. The next thing that we can have a look at would be the wave cut, which sort of does what it says on the tin, really. Sorry, I just set this back to 25, and I think this was 100. And the wave cut will, oops, again, I've been messing around with it. The wave cut will cut through your object with a wave shape. We can change the width of the wave, we can change the height of the wave, and again we can offset the rotation. The rotation offset is slightly strange with this one because the way it sees the layers, but it looks fairly nice. And we can just bring this back to nothing. We can offset the position as well. So we can offset that, or we could move this across to sort of create some wave type looks. And again, we've got the follow main rotation, so here it will be moving with the rotation because it's not cut very far, and the offsets sort of here somewhere. It will create these kind of crazy effects. But again, if we turn this off, we could have this, so it's the cut is staying in place while the object moves around it, which is going to again create some really nice effects. And last but not least, we have scanlines. And what these do are create scanlines. So if we just set that back to 0, you can see it makes these sort of scanlines on there. We can change the width of them if we want, and we can change the amount that they've been cut, and then we can change the rotation of them, offset the rotation of them, I should say, and create these really sort of nice, almost optical illusion looking effects where it looks like there's sort of curves running through shapes and stuff. And again, at the moment we've got follow main rotation set on, so these are going to follow the rotation of the shapes. If we turn this off, then they'll stay where they are. Just have the shapes move around them, which is probably a little easier to see again with the with it set to a polygon. So those are the effects you can play around with and see what you can come up with. And yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here for customization and just making everything how you want it to look, which I think is one of the really exciting things about this. So if you make anything cool, definitely leave a comment and leave a link to your work, and I really love seeing what people come up with this stuff. And if you have any problems with it, as I said, I'm not much of a coder, but I will try my hardest to help. And enjoy it and have fun and make something cool. Cheers.